The Man with the Golden Gun is now 50 years old and remains one of the most entertaining entries in the series. We gathered to discuss why we love the film so much, and it was great to have so many of you contribute with your thoughts. In part 3, we discuss the villains. John, this is a celebration, but the plot twist about sending her the bullet, people say that doesn't make sense.
I actually like the idea of her sending the bullet. I think that's a really nice act of desperation. And it probably is just about feasible that she would send it, because she talks about how Scaramanga speaks so admirably about Bond. I think my slight issue with it in terms of a plot point is it completely changes the motive of the film. So the whole the whole idea that he's been going around trying to find why Scaramanga's killing him, and then you hear this, and Scaramanga's not killing him whatsoever. You know, Scaramanga's never wanted to kill him, and he's not interested in Bond whatsoever. So now they have to bring in this MacGuffin with the Solex agitator to actually give the film some focus. Because there isn't actually Scaramanga's not bothered. I mean, even when he kills Maud Adams, you know, he says, "I've got nothing personal against you."
Yeah.
If he's
But
not interested
he's got
in...
nothing personal against him, but he's got 2 waxworks.
Well,
on.
exactly, yes.
Yeah, he's got no interest in killing him.
But I think he's obsessed with Bond. I think he genuinely like sees him as a peer, because he has like Al Capone there, and I think he puts James Bond on that same kind of level as Al Capone and these other legends.
Hey, Al, wherever you are, don't hold it against me.
Some of us will have posters on the wall, and he has waxworks of his favourite people. It's a bit similar to your man in Living Daylights with all his mannequins of world leaders, all in his own and likeness. You know? Well, that's what he says over dinner, isn't it? To us, Mr. Bond, we are the best.
Yeah.
You know, so he's and he knows all about him in the same circles of you know, your 6 bullets against mine, and what you do is for Queen and country. All of that sort of bits and pieces. So he's fully aware of that.
Excellent. Slightly reminiscent of a 34 Mouton.
Then I must add it to my cellar.
You live well, Scaramanga.
At $1 million a contract, I can afford to, Mr. Bond. You work for peanuts. A hearty well done from Her Majesty the Queen and a pittance of a pension. Apart from that, we are the same. To us, Mr. Bond, we are the best.
We were on that the interview with John Spira about the amazing documentary, which we still haven't seen, it's not out yet, about the life and deaths of Christopher Lee. And we went into his character a lot. He's had such a funny career. He's so well known. But this, despite what everyone says, it's still one of his best known roles, must be.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's I think he is, but I think pretty much perfectly cast for that. That's my only criticism of the film, really, is that you don't get enough of him, and you don't get enough of him and Roger on screen at the same time. When they are, it is magical. You know, when they sit down and have that meal together, or when they're at the Thai boxing match, it's so much fun. It's fun, and it feels there's such a palpable tension between the two of them. You know, that it could kick off at any moment, kind of thing.
There's a useful 4-letter word, and you're full of it. When I kill, it's on the specific orders of my government. And those I kill are themselves killers.
Oh, come, Mr. Bond. You disappoint me. You get as much fulfillment out of killing as I do, so why didn't you admit it?
I admit killing you would be a pleasure.
You should have done that when you first saw me. But then, of course, the English don't consider it sporting to kill in cold blood, do they?
Don't count on that.
Yeah, I think Christopher Lee is an absolute, you know, an icon, and you know, almost had such similar sort of career in a different way to Roger Moore, as being kind of typecast as a certain character and playing certain roles, and occasionally got to escape that, but was often kind of, you know, just sort of ring-fenced into these sort of roles. But I think his performance is great because he's Christopher Lee, and he's always great in everything he does. No matter how silly it is, no matter how ridiculous it is, he gives it his all. Like Roger, true professionals, who never look down on the material. I think that he has a great opening scene. He carries every scene with just like Bond, lots of charisma, but there's a darkness to him that you expect to not only from Christopher Lee, obviously, but also from that character himself. He comes across as dangerous.
See, Mr. Bond, like every great artist, I want to create an indisputable masterpiece once in my lifetime. The death of 007, mano a mano. A duel between titans. My golden gun against your Walther PPK. Each of us with a 50-50 chance.
6 bullets to your 1.
I only need 1.
And like I say, that the scene where he's with Maud Adams and she's in the bed and he has the gun on her, it is deeply unsettling, and it's really creepy to see. And the way his face, the way he switches from being quite kind of like sort of fairly sort of chatting, and obviously he's happy about what had happened in the previous scene, and the way that she just turns away and that look that he gives, she is not submissive, it gives you sort of goosebumps. It is genuinely a brilliant piece of acting. So for me, I think Christopher Lee can do no wrong, and in this film, he is brilliant. I say my own criticism, you don't see enough of him, and I love how also he can be quite scary, but also there's often like a little spring in his step.
Yeah,
when he kills high fat, he has that bury him. He loved that mausoleum, bury him, and there are certain moments where there is that twinkle in his eye, and you think actually parallel universe, he probably could have made a really good Bond. If his career had been very different, I think he's able to carry that lightness and the charm. And and obviously he's an amazing screen presence, which is why he's so iconic.
Bond doesn't know you're in Bangkok. He's never seen you, but he knows me. That's the problem.
There's no problem.
What happened?
Mr. Fatt has just resigned. I'm the new chairman of the board. He always did like that mausoleum. Put him in it.
Related to Ian Fleming as well.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah. He was always going to have to be in a Bond film, wasn't he? And I don't think you could have cast him as another villain as well as he could have been.
No, not
Scaramanga.
When he was going through that period where as an actor, as Joseph Wiseman was, but people need to remember that Joseph Wiseman was not of Oriental background. He was an American actor and was made to look Oriental as Dr. No. It wouldn't have been far to accept that there's a possibility that he might have been asked for Dr. No.
It's a similar scene, isn't it, really?
It's not a million miles away.
Dinner.
The dinner scene, which is so effective.
Yeah.
I think you can't go wrong if, say, in a new Bond, if you have a scene where Bond and the villain finally meet, knowing that each other is who they really are.
Yeah.
It's just scintillating, isn't it? I think they're brilliant.
Yeah.
And, I know we've had the one at the boxing.
When I was a boy, I was brought up in a circus. My only real friend was a magnificent African bull elephant. One day, his handler mistreated him and he went berserk. Bleeding, dying, he came and found me. Stood on one leg, his best trick. Picked me up and put me on his back. The man emptied the gun to his eye. I emptied my stage pistol into his.
An eye for an eye. Not.
You see, Mr. Bond, I always thought I liked animals. And I discovered that I like killing people even more.
I mean, every scene with Christopher Lee in is amongst the best of Bond, isn't it? Everything he's done in it is fantastic.
They knew each other quite well as well, because he'd appeared in a couple of episodes of The Avengers.
Right.
And Roger would have been doing The Saint, or the back end of The Saint, because I think his episodes were in '68. So Roger would have been sort of tying up The Saint for that last season, '68, '69. So they knew each other quite well, and had done little bits and pieces together. May have met in the army at some point, because Roger was a captain in the army. And in point of fact, Christopher Lee was probably more Bond than Bond. I mean, he was very, very into, special ops, black ops, all of that sort of stuff that is often referred to as special services these days. But he was doing all of that back around the back end of World War II and stuff of that nature. So he was very, very military minded. Probably gave Ian Fleming a whole bunch of ideas in connection with, the work that Ian Fleming used to do for the military and the work that he used to do. So there's an awful lot going on there, but he's very, very good in the role. There's no doubt about it. I remember seeing him in The Magic Christian, another Peter Sellers picture back in about 1970, where he plays some sort of something on a ship. I remember, and that was probably the first time I saw him. And then you got to see him a lot as whether it was Dracula or something of that nature, and all these bits and pieces, and then to realise that this Scaramanga, okay,
right,
and he does do it terribly well. He's also a very tall character, so he's imposing not only physically but also with his delivery of lines, and had an incredibly varied career. So I think he's beautifully cast as Scaramanga. And didn't turn the job down very quickly either. He said yes almost immediately. I think him and his wife, he said, "Oh, I've been offered a thing in a Bond movie." She said, "You should do it," and then that was it. That was it done then. So, signed and sealed.
He just brings such gravitas to the role. I mean, that incredible voice he's got, which probably even richer than Rogers, and you can't say that very often.
Yeah.
He's just so, and he has such brilliant lines in the film. You go through it and you think, oh, that line would work in a trailer. That line would work in a trailer.
Yeah.
And part of it is the way they're written, but a large part of it is the way he says them. He's fabulous. And by the time he did this, I've just been looking on Wikipedia. Would you believe he was in films from 1948?
Crazy guy.
It was incredible. And then, of course, I think he was in the films in the 48, and of course, we'll all remember him from films in things like Lord of the Rings. Much later, he was still around. I mean, this guy was in films for so long. It's quite incredible. But I think that's just shows you how good he was, that people wanted him at a very young age, right up until he was very elderly. And what an actor. And again, it's just briefly going back to the fact that I think it's daft that people say this is a rubbish Bond film.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got Christopher Lee, who even Bond fans who will tell you they don't like the film will tell you he's one of the best villains. How can you have a film with one of the best villains, one of the most memorable stunts, some of the best locations of any Bond film, and tell me it's not a good Bond film? The whole thing doesn't make any sense. I think it's just some sort of daft reputation it's got.
I remember his obituary in The Guardian, and they basically said that he had this reputation of being great in so many poor films.
Yes.
And I think that's an incredibly disingenuous take. And The Man with the Golden Gun was the number one example of this. When you are the title character of a film, you've got to stand out, especially when it's a James Bond film. We're going to have a James Bond film, but the title of this film is going to be somebody else, not you. You have got to stand out. And he absolutely does. And thankfully, we've had Goldfinger, Man with the Golden Gun, and Octopussy, and those title characters in all three of them have smashed it out of the park, which perfectly complements brilliant James Bond performances as well. I think I can't imagine anybody else playing Scaramanga. That's the thing for me, is that his acting chops, obviously, but his look, his height. You need to have this kind of loner assassin who isn't very well seen, who doesn't really lose his temper. You know, he stays at a level all the time. Killing is a matter of fact to him. It's not done out of emotion. It's not done out of. He probably gets a sexual kick out of it, as the song says, but it's done as a job, basically. That's the thing with it. And it's perfectly complemented by Nick Nack, because Nick Nack is the only ally that someone as Scaramanga could have, because he can't have a henchman who's a physical threat. And Scaramanga comes across as a clever guy anyway, but he hasn't got much of a kind of scheme, so he doesn't need a mastermind either. So the only way to go it is to get someone who's just as odd in a completely physically contrasting way, and it works brilliantly. It's like that decade's version of Arnold Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito. Isn't it? Do you know what I mean? It's that kind of like contrast going on.
When Mankiewicz wrote the character, he'd originally pitched for Jack Palance, as being an idea of a physical form. And Palance is he was a very hard drinking macho sort of character. He was broad. He was built like a brick outhouse. You know, he was a really imposing character. And yet, casting Christopher Lee, who is imposing in a very different way. He's very tall. He's not particularly broad or muscular as Palance would have been. So all of that performance would have had to have been through his delivery of the lines and his, the way he deals with individuals around him, the way he deals with props around him, the whole concept of the golden gun itself, and being able to deliver lines whilst putting it together, all that sort of stuff, the dexterity of the man.
In modern cinema, to have a villain who's an assassin and a loner, they'd be living in a dark place with screens spying and sort of into hacking and all. I know that's how things have changed, and they'd be, hooded and stuff like that. And that's why what I mean about the image of this film, how creative it is. Scaramanga is not like that. Obviously he's recluse and he's living in, away from people, but think of like James Bond Island, think about his lair, and his funhouse. What an unbelievable extra few dimensions to add to a villain. We've talked about physically, everything, from him being like handsome, tall and all that. But the way that he, spends his money, what a brilliant extra dimension to his character.
Yeah.
Because like I say, in modern cinema, I don't think they'd have the balls to do that at all.
100%. He's my favourite. Always has been for a long time. Christopher Lee is a unique actor. He's in the Guinness World Records, I think, for the most number of leading roles. It's over 200. It may be more. His life is a Bond film in reality. He served in the RAF. He was involved in special operations. I always remember his story that he relays. Is it Saruman? I haven't seen Lord of the Rings for years, so forgive me. But it was when he was performing this scene, his death scene, and Peter Jackson was directing him on how he should react and respond when he's stabbed. And he was saying, well, this is how you need to react. And Christopher Lee took him almost to one side and said, no, when you stab someone in the back, there's no sound because you're literally gasping for air. And it's when you hear when he relays the story, it's actually quite chilling because he has actually lived and breathed literally James Bond's life in reality. He was almost an assassin and the most incredible man, the most incredible actor. His personal favourite role of all time was Lord Summerisle in The Wicker Man. He to such an extent, he didn't take a paycheck for that film. And I think Scaramanga is absolutely up there. His voice, his delivery, it carries the weight of 1,000 men. And I absolutely adore him. And I would say personally, I don't think anybody who's been in Bond could have portrayed Scaramanga in the manner in which Christopher Lee did. But I adore him. And the amount of lines and dialogue he has. There's so many lines we've not mentioned here. Obviously we've discussed the weight, the gravitas of the themes in which he shares with Roger. But for me, when he talks about, it's $1 million a contract, I can afford to, Mr. Bond. All these different lines. And he said, oh, the wine, I should add it to my cellar. He's so quotable, and people forget this. He for me, is the defining element of this film, and it's why we love it. And like you say, he's one of the titular characters from the third-person perspective.
There won't be anyone like him ever again. I mean, that's certain. There is no chance. And another thing people say, of course, is a Bond film is only as good as its villain. Right then, well, why? What's your problem?
It's top draw then. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. We rest our cases.
Yeah.
1.5 villains. Yeah.
Nick Nack's a weird one because I'd have thought he was easy meat for clickbaits. That this is ridiculous. Who is this guy? But for some reason, he's never criticised or mentioned an awful lot. The Fleming Easters don't really dive in for him.
Fleming Easters.
They've got easy meat with the karate and that pepper stuff, haven't they? So for some reason, Nick Nack isn't one of the weirdest things in this film. That's how good it is.
And yet the overview of it is that it's a really bizarre piece of casting, because I don't think that I'm not entirely convinced that Nick Nack was written as a little person, as they like to be referred to.
Yeah.
He was written as a standard size human henchman or something of that nature. So, and of course, Hervé was a painter, wasn't he?
Yeah.
I think he'd done some maybe bits and pieces of television and was always cast. Was sick of doing pantomime, I imagine. But was a painter and was a very good painter. And somebody had given him it might even have been Mankiewicz who had suggested him. He's quite a lovable character. That whole thing at the start where he sees Bond for the first time in the Hong Kong street, there's Bond checking his time, then you look down through the televisions and there's Hervé doing the same thing with the bowler hat and the stuff. It's a lovely moment, And he's a very annoying character. He knows. He knows full well
really
and says to Bond.
Although he is obviously very short, that's not made a thing really beyond those, like you mentioned, the way Roger looks at him. He's just a character in the film.
He's just a character,
and he plays it terrifically.
And he stuffs him into a suitcase, of course.
Yeah.
Yep. That's the big payoff.
I kill you.
For you.
Oh.
Nick Nack realizes and says to him, if you kill him, all this will be mine. He knows full well that, this is not just a case of, you killing him. It's me having a future. This is all mine. Everything belongs to me.
Yeah.
If you kill him, all this be mine.
So there's a kind of kinship because he's trying to help him. Kind of gives him an idea. I've never shot a midget before, but there's always a first time. I say, oh, monsieur, all that sort of stuff. I'm trying to help you do all of this. So there's directions.
Monsieur, Good shooting.
I've never killed a midget before, but there can always be a first time.
Oh, monsieur.
But he is ridiculously annoying. That whole running around thing and jumping up onto that bar that he jumps on when he's off the seat. So, yes, exactly. Your little golden gun. Oh, for God's sake, just get on with it. You know. Your little golden gun. It wasn't going to be a big golden gun, was it? Clearly. So all of those little bits, but he is one of those characters that sort of turns up here and there in the story and just takes it a few more pages. And yeah, he's an interesting character. We never saw the like of him again, on screen in that type of role, up until that point. And my understanding of these characters, it had been Oompa Loompas, pantomime, and then Nick Nack, and the same guy doing Fantasy Island, which he did later on, very successfully. But after that, it all went a bit downhill. If you haven't seen that wonderful thing, that there was what was it called? My Weekend with Hervé, or Dinner with Hervé. It's very good. Peter Dinklage plays him and plays him terribly well, and it gives you a bit more insight into the actor himself. But the character, here's the character, and that's do the thing on the page, and he delivers it, and he does it, and he was a bit of a character while he was there, as the girls kept reminding everybody. You going to bed, girls? Right, lock your doors. Hervé's out.
Yeah.
Oh God, no. He was a bit of a tearaway.
Chris, it wouldn't happen now, would it? You'll never get anyone cast like this, a character like this in a Bond film or any film, really.
No, it is hard to imagine someone being cast like this. But I think it just seems a bit much more exciting casting. There is a little bit of it is novelty, isn't it? It's like, let's get the little person and But again, it sort of just adds to the dynamics of him. That again, something that I missed on the first dozen viewings is that he's basically hiring people to kill Christopher Scaramanga, so he will inherit everything that's his. That's brilliant. I love that. And again, it's the yin and yang, and then being, Christopher Lee being like 6'5" or whatever he was, and Hervé not being 6'5". Is interesting, and he's again a total character, and the scenes that he's in are very funny, and he's completely in on the joke, so you don't feel like anyone's he doesn't feel like he's obviously there are references to his height, but he's not the butt of the joke constantly. He is actually taken quite seriously in some scenes. It is a bit stunt casting, but again, I think it works really well. I think it's charming, and I don't think he felt particularly, work's work, isn't it?
All the voices of these characters. I mean, they're some of the most iconic voices, aren't they? Rogers, Christopher Lee's, and Nick Nack's. He could have just been cast because he's small, but
he wasn't cast because of his French accent. I think that's
that's what I mean. But his voice is so identifiable, isn't it?
Well, I think what he lacked in height, he made up for in libido. So
yeah.
And I mean, I think he was actually a bigger personality than his character that he portrayed on screen. I mean, some of the stories that Maud Adams shares about Hervé are actually, have gone down in legendary history, haven't they?
Yeah. Hervé, that sounds a little bit like Pervé. He's why? Tell me, Hervé, why do they call you the horse? Oh dear Lord, no. All of that sort of stuff. So his little golden gun was not the issue, I don't think, as far as that was concerned from the girl's perspective. Yeah, but he was a character.
Yeah.
It was always Roger said on it was a Russell Harty interview that he did, I think, before Man with the Golden Gun, around that sort of time, that Hervé was always the one who you didn't know when he was going to turn up on set, because he was probably still out 2 hours before they were asked to go there.
I think he's a great addition, sideline to Christopher Lee, and he brings an element of humour. But he's also very unnerving as well at the same time, especially when he's observing Rodney, and he's almost getting his own style of gratification out of the deaths that Scaramanga inflicts, and that's unsettling at the same time. And I mean, the scene at the end as well with Goodnight is it's unnerving, but there's a certain streak of hilarity in there as well. You know, when he's chucking all the bottles, and you know, and Bond's trying to find him under the bed, and he's escaped, and he's gone round this side. I mean, it's incredibly humorous.
Down the side of the sofa, you know.
Exactly, and then I mean, oh god, you wouldn't get away with it nowadays. But Bond shoves him in the suitcase, and it's like, and I mean, why you would have a suitcase behind your private bar in your own bedroom?
It's probably to hold all of those empty bottles.
Well, exactly. Yeah, the fact he can't breathe, and then you think, what the hell is Bond doing to this character? Then suddenly it's like he's all the way up in the rafters in the crow's nest. I mean, it's a shame actually they never brought him back, at least for a cameo.
Imagine with Timothy
After Fantasy Island, where he goes, "The plane."
I mean, what would have been the ultimate hilarity would have been when Jaws discovers, when he crashes in the cable car, suddenly Nick Nack turns up and they look into each other's eyes.
Brilliant.
And then suddenly, yeah, you've got this incredible relationship that's forged on screen. That would have been affection.
I would really have liked, now you've mentioned it, I've never thought about it now, but now you've mentioned it, that moment where Drax is on the phone and goes, yes, well, if you could get him, you know, and then they cut to Nick. That would have been just brilliant.
Tom Mason on the face.
I'd have paid really good money.
Yeah, a caveat to that would have been, if you can get him, of course, and it's like Nick Nack trying to answer the call. And it's like, no, sorry, no, wrong number. It's the other guy we need, the tall one. You know.
In this film where there's so much to enjoy, there's so much watchable, especially, you know, as a child, there's so much like fantastic stuff to see. You've got Scaramanga, who's pretty threatening, straight, you know, and absolutely, you know, organised and everything. Nick Nack is such good entertainment, you know, and there is the novelty of what he looks like and how it's not appeared in a Bond film before or after. And, you know, like scurrying around and all, like, I think he's brilliant viewing entertainment, and it's not just his size, but Hervé Villechaize does play the part really, really well. He does make it something more interesting than just his size.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Kieran hit it perfectly on the head in terms of there is this fun part of it, and although you don't see him as a physical threat, he has that unsettling, definitely unsettling effect when he's in that nappy John. And you know, when he's spying, you know, like there's something creepy about that. You know, it could equally appear in a horror film.
Yeah,
and that's what, you know, Man with the Golden Gun does walk the line a little bit between the two. And yeah, I think he's an absolutely brilliant character who's extremely memorable, and not just because of his size, not just because of his physical stature.
Very interesting to see Mankiewicz's very first draft, to see if the character was, if he got him in mind or he got a different type of henchman for Scaramanga before.
I seem to remember it was just a standard henchman, but it would have been nice to see if there was something like that.
Well, Kra, or whatever he's called.
Kra? Yes. That's Kra, maintenance and security. He looks after everything in here. Nick Nack does everything else when he isn't publishing silver.
The guy, you know, who's sort of perving on Goodnight at the end when he gets knocked into
so harsh. Like Esquire ranked the 119 villains in James Bond from worst to best, starting at 119.
And where did Kra come?
119. So harsh.
Yeah. Elvis, like, come on. Yeah. Keep watching our 50th anniversary special of The Man with the Golden Gun. And in part 4, we chat about those wonderful allies